I gazed out at the road, my heart suddenly did a little flip-flop, and then a bigger flip-flop. I yanked my feet off the dashboard and sat forward, breathing in deeply. My heart was racing, and I felt dizzy. "What's wrong?" Jordan asked. But I couldn't answer him. I was too panicked to speak. Was I having a heart attack? The thought made me even dizzier. I felt as though there were a giant weight on my chest, and I couldn't breathe. I shook my head at him, wide-eyed. "Something's wrong," I finally managed to say. Not knowing what else to do, Jordan followed highway signs to the nearest hospital emergency room and walked with me through the double doors. Several hours and multiple tests later, the doctor concluded that I'd had a series of heart palpitations, but that I was otherwise young and healthy, and he sent us on our way. From that day on, I lived in fear of having another episode like the one in the car. And in fact, I began to have them quite frequently. Chest pounding, heart racing and palpitating, severe dizziness. It was an awful problem, one that I quickly began to feel imprisoned by. Looking back on that initial visit to the emergency room, I so wish that the doctor had probed more into my psychology. If he had asked even just a few personal questions, he would have learned that I was in an extremely anxiety-provoking phase of life. I was about to move away from home for the first time, and both of my parents were battling cancer. Unfortunately, I was too young to correlate such events, and the attacks continued to plague me. The deceiving thing about anxiety is that it can manifest in such real physical symptoms that most people do not realize that anxiety is the source of their problem. In fact, it would take me many years to learn this for myself, but when I finally did, I was able to begin climbing out of this anxious phase of my life. I now help countless other people do the same, but it is the road on which I got here that taught me everything I know today about the affliction that is anxiety and how unresolved grief is inextricably woven into it. I was 14 when both of my parents got cancer at the same time. I was an only child, and the prospect of losing my family was something that loomed over me constantly throughout my adolescence. While my father's prostate cancer was treated easily and he quickly went into remission, my mother's late-stage colon cancer took our small family on a roller coaster of hospitals and doctors and seemingly endless treatments. My parents were wonderful people. They'd met and married late in life, both of them each other's third marriage. My father was an engineer and a World War II prisoner of war. My mother was a glamorous artist living in Manhattan. She was 40 and he was 57 when I was born. And even though my father had 3 grown children from his first marriage, my mother had always wanted one of her own. I was born in 1978 in Atlanta, and for a long time, our lives were good. But by the time I headed off to college, my father was in his 70s, and my mother's cancer had begun to win the 5-year battle she'd been fighting. She died midway through my freshman year at a small liberal arts school in Vermont. I didn't make it in time to be by her side during her final moments. My mother's death rocked me. I was absolutely floored by it. Nothing could have prepared me for it. Not the 5 years we'd spent helping her combat her illness, not the talks my father had with me about her potential demise, not the school guidance counselor's sessions. The truth was, I never believed she would actually die. Because mothers don't die. Bad things don't actually happen. I now understand that the dismantling of those beliefs became the catalyst for my anxiety. When my mother's death disproved those 2 beliefs I'd so fervently held on to, the whole floor dropped out. If my mother could die, anything, absolutely anything, could happen. I took a hiatus from school and went back home to Georgia to help my father pack up and move out of our house. I got a job as a waitress, and I struggled to relate to my old friends from high school who came around to check on me. No one I knew had experienced so significant a loss. Everyone was sympathetic, but nonetheless, I felt very alone in my grief. The anxiety attacks continued to surface and even worsen. I lived in fear of having them, and I navigated a constant undercurrent of panic. I worried that my father was going to die at any moment. I worried that I would die. And less concrete than those fears, I simply felt a yawing dizziness at the idea that life was completely out of my control. I turned to alcohol to quell the anxiety, and I attached myself to a young man who had also recently lost a family member and was deep in the throes of his own grief. Together, we made our way to New York City, and it was there in a college psychology class where I realized for the first time what had happened all those years ago.